Nietzsche's critique of Christianity is not peripheral to his philosophy, it is central. Christianity is not just one belief system among others for Nietzsche. It is the decisive moral event in Western history. To understand modern values, Nietzsche believes one must understand Christianity's psychological and cultural legacy. Nietzsche does not approach Christianity as a theologian. He does not argue about miracles, doctrines, or metaphysical claims. He treats Christianity as a moral system, a way of valuing life, suffering, strength, weakness, guilt, and hope. What concerns him is not whether Christianity is true, but what kind of human beings it produces. This distinction is crucial. Nietzsche believes Christianity succeeded not because it offered the most accurate picture of reality, but because it answered deep psychological needs. It spoke to the powerless, the suffering, the resentful, and the excluded, not by changing their conditions, but by transforming their values. Where ancient cultures admired strength, vitality, and excellence, Christianity elevated humility, meekness, obedience, and self-denial. Where power had once been celebrated openly, it was now condemned morally. Nietzsche saw this not as moral progress, but as a reversal of values, one that would reshape Western consciousness for centuries. Importantly, Nietzsche does not deny Christianity's historical power. On the contrary, he respects it as one of the most successful moral systems ever created. It conquered empires, reorganized conscience, and redefined what it meant to be good. But success, for Nietzsche, is not the same as health. What disturbed Nietzsche was Christianity's relationship to life itself. He believed it taught people to distrust their instincts, to interpret suffering as guilt, and to hope for meaning elsewhere rather than affirming existence as it is. In doing so, Christianity did not eliminate suffering. It moralized it. This is why Nietzsche calls Christianity Platonism for the masses. Like Plato, it divided reality into a higher and lower world. But unlike Plato, it made this division emotionally universal. Everyone was taught to see themselves as fallen, sinful, and in need of redemption. For Nietzsche, Christianity matters because modern morality still bears its imprint, even after belief has faded. Ideas of guilt, equality, moral innocence, and suspicion of strength did not disappear with God. They survived him. To critique Christianity, then, is not to attack the past. It is to diagnose the present. Nietzsche argues that Christianity did not merely add new beliefs to the ancient world, it reversed the moral compass by which life had previously been evaluated. Before Christianity, moral value tended to follow strength, vitality, excellence, and rank. Good named what was noble, powerful, and life-affirming. Christianity overturned this hierarchy. What makes Christianity revolutionary in Nietzsche's view is not its theology, but its revaluation of values. Traits once associated with weakness, humility, obedience, meekness, patience, were elevated to moral virtues. Traits associated with strength, pride, dominance, assertiveness, confidence, were reinterpreted as moral failings. This was not a gradual evolution. It was a moral inversion. Nietzsche insists this inversion was not accidental. It was a response to historical conditions. Christianity emerged among the powerless, the enslaved, the marginalized, people who lacked direct means of asserting themselves in the world. Unable to act, they reinterpreted. They did not overthrow their rulers physically, they overthrew them morally. This is the genius Nietzsche attributes to Christianity. It transformed impotence into moral superiority. The weak no longer needed to win in the world. They could win in conscience. Suffering became a sign of righteousness. Failure became evidence of moral purity. Power was recast as corruption. Christianity's moral revolution therefore shifted the battleground inward. Instead of asking who is stronger, it asked who is purer. Instead of admiring achievement, it prized intention. Instead of affirming life as it is, it promised redemption from life as it ought not to be. Nietzsche does not deny the psychological appeal of this move. On the contrary, he believes it explains Christianity's success. A morality that sanctifies suffering and condemns strength offers meaning to those who cannot flourish under older value systems. It gives dignity where there was none. But Nietzsche's critique begins precisely here. A morality that arises from reactive conditions, he argues, does not simply comfort the weak. It reshapes culture itself. Once moral value is detached from vitality and attached to denial, the entire civilization begins to turn against life. This is why Nietzsche does not treat Christianity as a private faith. He treats it as a world historical moral event, one whose consequences continue long after belief itself fades. The revolution Christianity introduced was not spiritual liberation. It was a transformation of how human beings learn to value themselves. For Nietzsche, Christianity's most radical achievement was not moral teaching, but moral redefinition. It did not merely argue that the weak deserved protection. It taught that weakness itself was good. This was a profound shift in how human value was understood. In pre-Christian moral worlds, strength was admired openly. Strength did not only mean physical force, it meant confidence, self-assertion, the ability to act decisively, and the willingness to bear responsibility. Weakness was not condemned, but it was not idealized. It was treated as a fact of life, not a virtue. Christianity reversed this evaluation. Strength was no longer simply power. It became arrogance, pride, and moral danger. Weakness was no longer a limitation. It became humility, innocence, and moral superiority. The powerless were recast as closer to God, and the powerful as spiritually suspect. Nietzsche insists that this reversal was not motivated by compassion in the modern sense. It was driven by necessity. Those who could not express power outwardly learned to exercise it inwardly. Moral judgment replaced action. Evaluation replaced creation. The powerless gained a new weapon, the ability to condemn. This is why Nietzsche believes Christianity did not abolish power. It rerouted it. Power did not disappear. It changed form. It moved from physical dominance to moral authority. The ability to declare who is sinful, who is corrupt, and who is damned became a new kind of supremacy. Over time, this moral authority proved more enduring than force. Armies can be defeated. Moral systems persist. Once strength is defined as dangerous and weakness as virtuous, entire cultures begin to distrust vitality itself. Ambition becomes suspect. Confidence becomes arrogance. Excellence becomes exclusion. Nietzsche saw this as the beginning of a long cultural transformation. Even as belief in God wanes, the moral suspicion of strength remains. People continue to apologize for success, downplay ability, and moralize equality, not because Christianity commands it, but because its value system has been absorbed into the cultural bloodstream. This is why Nietzsche believed Christianity's victory was so complete. It did not need believers to survive. Its moral grammar continued to structure judgment, guilt, and praise long after faith itself weakened. The rise of the weak was not a revolt in the streets. It was a revolution in values, one whose consequences still shape how we judge ourselves and others. One of Nietzsche's most penetrating insights is that Christianity did not merely condemn certain actions. It re-engineered the human psyche. Where earlier moral systems judged deeds, Christianity judged souls. Power, which had once been expressed outwardly, was turned inward. This inward turn created what Nietzsche saw as a new kind of human being, the guilty subject. In Christianity, suffering is no longer just misfortune. It becomes evidence of sin, corruption, or moral failure. Pain is interpreted, not endured. Instead of asking what caused suffering in the world, Christianity asks what the sufferer did to deserve it. This shift transforms existence into a moral trial. Nietzsche believed this move was extraordinarily effective. When power is internalized, control no longer requires force. Individuals police themselves. Conscience replaces punishment. Guilt replaces resistance. The subject becomes both judge and accused, endlessly interrogating their own motives. This is where Nietzsche locates the birth of what he later calls bad conscience. Aggression that cannot be discharged outwardly turns inward. Instincts that once sought expression are reinterpreted as temptations to be resisted. Cruelty, denied external outlets, is redirected against the self. Christianity sanctifies this process. Self-denial becomes virtue. Self-suspicion becomes wisdom. The individual learns to distrust their own desires and to experience natural impulses as moral danger. Over time, this produces a deep psychological tension. Life is felt as something that must be justified rather than lived. Nietzsche does not deny that this inward turn created remarkable depth. It produced introspection, discipline, and inner life. But he believed the cost was enormous. A culture trained to interpret suffering as guilt becomes skilled at self-punishment and poor at self-affirmation. This is why Nietzsche insists that Christianity's power lies not in belief, but in psychological formation. Even when faith fades, guilt remains. The habits of self-surveillance persist. People continue to feel morally compromised without knowing why. Power did not disappear in Christianity. It learned to hide inside the human soul. Nietzsche believed that Christianity reached its most extreme expression in what he called the ascetic ideal. The idea that denying life is itself a moral achievement. Asceticism does not merely regulate desire. It teaches that desire is suspect, that instinct is dangerous, and that flourishing in this world is morally inferior to renunciation. The ascetic ideal offers a powerful psychological solution to suffering. If life is painful, unjust, or disappointing, then the problem is not existence itself, but attachment to it. Meaning is preserved by shifting value away from life as it is and toward life as it ought to be, elsewhere, later, or beyond. Suffering is no longer meaningless, it becomes purposeful. Nietzsche does not deny the appeal of this move. For people crushed by circumstances they cannot change, asceticism provides dignity. It allows pain to be interpreted as moral depth rather than failure. The problem, Nietzsche argues, is that this solution comes at the cost of affirming life itself. Asceticism trains people to experience vitality as guilt. Pleasure becomes temptation. Strength becomes danger. Joy becomes distraction. Life is no longer something to be intensified, but something to be endured correctly. Over time, this produces what Nietzsche calls a will to nothingness, a preference for negation over risk, safety over intensity. Nietzsche also notes that asceticism does not eliminate desire, it redirects it. The desire to dominate, to judge, to control reappears in moral form. The ascetic becomes powerful precisely through renunciation. Those who deny themselves claim authority over those who do not. This is why Nietzsche sees asceticism not as humility, but as a refined expression of power. It allows those who cannot affirm life to rule over it morally. In doing so, it keeps resentment alive under the guise of virtue. For Nietzsche, the tragedy is not that asceticism exists, it is that it comes to define goodness itself. When denial becomes the highest value, life is placed under suspicion. Existence must justify itself before it can be embraced. Christianity, in Nietzsche's view, did not teach humanity how to live. It taught humanity how to endure life by condemning it. Nietzsche believed one of Christianity's most remarkable features was its ability to outlive belief in God itself. Even as faith weakened, the moral structure Christianity created remained intact. This survival is not accidental. It reveals that Christianity's deepest power was never theological. It was psychological. Christianity trained human beings to interpret themselves morally. It taught them to read intention into suffering, to locate guilt within the self, and to judge life through moral categories rather than instinctive ones. Once these habits are internalized, belief in God becomes optional. The moral machinery continues to operate on its own. This is why Nietzsche insists that modern secular morality is not a break from Christianity, but its continuation by other means. Ideas such as moral equality, universal guilt, suspicion of power, and reverence for suffering persist even when God is no longer named. The values survive the metaphysics that once justified them. Nietzsche sees this as a profound cultural confusion. Modern people believe they have escaped religion, yet they continue to think, judge, and condemn in religious ways. Moral outrage replaces sin. Social condemnation replaces damnation. Redemption is sought through recognition rather than salvation. This persistence creates a contradiction. A morality that once depended on God now floats without grounding. It demands obedience but cannot explain why. When questioned, it responds not with argument but with accusation. Nietzsche believes this is why modern moral discourse feels brittle, aggressive, and anxious. Christianity's survival after God also explains why nihilism emerges. Once values lose their foundation but retain their authority, they become hollow. They continue to command, but no longer convince. The result is moral exhaustion, a culture enforcing values it no longer believes in. For Nietzsche, this is not progress, it is delay. Humanity has not yet faced the consequences of its own disbelief. It has abandoned God, but kept his morality, and in doing so has postponed the real reckoning. Christianity did not need believers to endure. It needed habits, and those habits proved harder to kill than God himself. Nietzsche knew his critique of Christianity would provoke outrage, and not only from believers. It offends because it does not argue politely. It reinterprets motives. Nietzsche does not ask whether Christian morality is sincere. He asks what psychological conditions made it necessary. This move strips moral systems of their innocence. It suggests that values are not pure expressions of goodness, but responses to fear, weakness, suffering, and powerlessness. For many people, this feels like an attack not on belief, but on identity itself. What makes Nietzsche's critique enduringly offensive is that it does not fade with secularization. Even those who reject religion often react defensively to his analysis. That reaction, Nietzsche would say, confirms his point. The values remain emotionally charged even when their metaphysical grounding is gone. Nietzsche also offends because he refuses consolation. He does not offer a kinder version of Christianity or a safer replacement. He insists that life must be affirmed without appeal to another world, another time, or another judge. For many, this demand feels cruel rather than liberating. Yet Nietzsche believed that offense was unavoidable. A culture that has organized itself around guilt, denial, and moralized suffering cannot be gently persuaded to abandon them. Such values must be confronted, not reassured. This is why Nietzsche's critique still resonates. It explains why moral certainty often feels hostile, why strength feels suspicious, and why joy can provoke resentment. These patterns are not accidents. They are the legacy of a moral revolution that reshaped the human psyche. Nietzsche does not ask us to abandon morality. He asks us to ask what kind of life our morality serves. That question remains unresolved.